She sacrificed herself for her family and accepted a marriage she didn't choose. He just wanted an obedient, cold wife, one easy to keep on a short leash. But it only took seeing her blossoming in the sun, free, for jealousy to consume him. If you enjoy stories of love and romance, watch until the end and you won't regret it. Subscribe to this channel and leave a comment telling us where you're listening to this beautiful story from. Let's continue. Isabel Manning was raised not to feel. In her world, silence was discipline and desire, a fatal mistake. The only daughter of a morally ruined congressman and a woman in a state of permanent emotional collapse, she grew up amidst the chilly corridors of apartments in Washington, D.C., elite boarding schools in New England, and windows that opened onto distant landscapes, as if everything warm, free, or alive was meant to be observed from afar, never to be touched or experienced. She was beautiful in an old-fashioned way, like a photograph that had never been touched by human hands. Skin as fair as porcelain, brown hair that shone like silk in the sun, and green eyes that seemed to hold secrets even she didn't know. At 23, she carried in her body the virginity of someone who had never truly lived, and in her soul, a silent yearning for something she couldn't name, a hunger that haunted her during sleepless nights. That was why, when her father called her for a private conversation in the dim office of their Georgetown apartment and explained the arrangement with a trembling voice and fleeting eyes, Isabel didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't protest. She simply agreed, as she always did. The scandal looming over the family could destroy not only what was left of Congressman Manning's reputation, but also kill her mother, who could barely withstand the pressures of antidepressants and the lies that sustained her social life. The proposal was crystal clear, an arranged marriage to Damien Knight, the son of the hotel magnate her father had betrayed and deceived in the past during a bidding deal that nearly destroyed the Knight family empire. In exchange for the union, total protection, renewed prestige, absolute silence about her father's political crimes. Isabel accepted, the deal as if she were sealing a sentence, not of death but of complete self-forgetfulness. Damien Knight was the absolute opposite of the fragility she knew. 39 years old, educated in emotional war rooms since childhood, the direct heir to an empire built on political blackmail, strategic alliances, and the calculated downfall of enemies. He was known throughout the country for his relentless strategic coldness, his obsessive control over everything and everyone around him, and his complete aversion to love and emotions, which he considered unforgivable weaknesses. He had the face of a Greek god carved from marble and the gaze of a man who had lost any trace of human tenderness before he even reached adolescence. His black hair was always perfectly styled, his beard always perfectly trimmed, his suits always perfectly tailored by Italian artisans. Marrying Isabel was not a personal choice but a calculated settling of scores. She would be useful for his public image, submissive as a doll, untouched as a trophy. There would be no love between them, but there would be perfect order. The wedding was discreet, with no party, no passionate kisses, no display of affection whatsoever, just a cold exchange of signatures at an elegant D.C. clerk's office and the symbolic handover of an entire life. Isabel arrived at the Knight Mansion in Miami Beach, Florida, like an expensive porcelain doll placed in a showcase of absolute luxury. The mansion was a modern palace of glass and marble, with a direct view of the ocean, an infinity pool, gardens designed by famous landscape artists, and a team of staff who treated her with silent reverence. She complained about nothing. She demanded nothing. She simply lived, or rather she survived day after day. She would wake up early, have breakfast alone on the veranda, read classic novels in the immense library, eat lunch alone, swim in the empty pool, and have dinner alone when Damien was traveling for business, which was most of the time. When he was home, they dined together in absolute silence, him checking emails on his phone, her watching the reflection of the silver candles on the porcelain plates. But there was something Damien, with his calculating intelligence, failed to see: the transformative power of time. And what time does to a young woman who slowly, painfully, mysteriously begins to feel for the first time in her life. The first seismic tremor in her orderly life, came from a small, seemingly insignificant gesture. A book left behind by a guest in the library of the family's five-star resort, which was on the same property as the mansion. A contemporary American novel with passages underlined in red ink about freedom, passion, and inner fire. Then, a song she overheard by accident as she passed the resort bar at dusk, a melancholic jazz tune that spoke of love and longing and made her heart beat differently for the first time. A window left open during a summer storm that completely soaked the marble floor of her bedroom, and she, instead of calling someone to clean it, just stood there, feeling the warm, humid wind on her face, her hair flying free, a strange and delicious sensation of being alive. An afternoon when she went to the resort's private beach and saw in the distance a child playing on the golden sand, the daughter of wealthy guests from New York City. The little girl ran with her hair wet from the sea, her small feet dirty with salt and sand, her free crystalline laughter echoing across the deserted beach. Isabel stopped walking. She felt something physically break inside her chest, like shattering glass. A strange kind of longing for what she had never lived, a sharp pain for a childhood she never had, a youth she never experienced. And then, like spring arriving after an eternal winter, the radical change that would shake the foundations of her life began. She started walking barefoot through the marble corridors of the mansion, feeling the coldness of the stone on her delicate feet. She began to look at herself longer in the bathroom mirror, studying her own face as if she were meeting herself for the first time. She started swimming in the infinity pool at dawn, when the sun rose from behind the distant city skyline and painted the Miami sky with shades of pink and gold she had never truly noticed before. And one January morning, when the heat already promised a scorching day, she did something that would change everything. She put on a simple, almost naive white bikini with a crooked bow on the back that she couldn't fix properly, and she went into the ocean for the first time in her life. She walked barefoot on the hot sand as if she had been doing it forever, as if she were born for it. The Miami sun kissed her bare shoulders with affection. Her brown hair was completely loose, flying with the sea breeze. The white fabric of the bikini contrasted with her fair skin, which was beginning to take on a golden hue. And in that magical moment, for the first time in her 23 years of existence, she seemed whole, complete, truly alive. Damien saw her from the balcony of his second-floor office in the mansion, and something inside him crumbled like a wall struck by an earthquake. What he felt wasn't just primitive jealousy. It was pure terror, an ancient fear of something he couldn't name or control, because she no longer looked like his personal property. She looked as free as a wild bird, as alive as a dancing flame, and that was something he didn't know how to dominate, how to manipulate, how to possess completely. The man who had never loved anyone but himself completely lost the control he thought he had over everything. He began to watch Isabel with cameras discreetly installed throughout the mansion. He hired private security to accompany her whenever she left the property. He subtly manipulated her schedule, creating social commitments and obligations that kept her busy and away from the beach that seemed to love her so much. His touches, when he finally approached her on the rare nights they were both home, became firmer, more possessive, more desperate. The desire he felt for her, once controlled and calculated, became darker, more intense, more confusing. And yet, to his surprise and horror, Isabel wanted him too, because within the pain he caused, there was a forbidden pleasure that confused her deeply, and paradoxically, made her more her own person with each passing day. It was in this explosive context of emotional turmoil that Raphael Carter appeared in their lives like a bomb about to detonate. Young, only 28, an American raised in France, a talented photographer hired specifically for the new international image campaign for the night hotels. He was different from all the men Isabel had ever known, intuitive where others were calculating, gentle where others were harsh, an artist where others were cold businessmen. He didn't desire her physically, at least not at first, not in an obvious or predatory way, but he saw something in her that was extremely rare and precious, a genuinely alive woman trapped forever in a dead golden castle. He became, without realizing it, a mirror in which she could see herself as she truly was. a silent ally in her personal war for her own freedom. And without her consciously realizing it, a living reminder of what it meant to be seen and valued as a human being, not as a decorative object. Raphael had light, wind-tousled hair, blue eyes that seemed to hold interesting stories of distant places, strong, calloused hands from someone who worked with art, and an easy, genuine smile that lit up any room. He wore simple but elegant clothes, spoke English with a slight French accent that sounded like music, and had the rare gift of making Isabel laugh, something she hadn't done in years. Damien immediately knew of Raphael's presence on his property, and for the first time in his life, he feared something real and concrete, because he clearly saw the risk of losing Isabel not through betrayal or rebellion, but through something much more dangerous, her awakening to a genuine desire for freedom and happiness. And then, as if fate wanted to make everything even more complex and painful, Damien discovered a truth that would completely change the game between them all. Raphael Carter was not just a talented photographer hired by chance. He was his half-brother, the illegitimate son of the Knight patriarch, the result of an affair the old man had with an American woman who had been living in Paris for decades. He was there not just for his artistic talent, but by a blood right that had never been officially recognized, and perhaps, just perhaps, out of an unconscious desire for revenge against the family that had rejected him since birth. By approaching Isabel with his natural and genuine kindness, Raphael was also, even without openly admitting it, trying to wound Damien where he was most vulnerable. And what Damien held most precious, to everyone's surprise, including his own, was precisely that delicate woman who was learning to be strong. The tension among the three quickly transformed into a silent, brutal war, where every glance, every word, every gesture carried the weight of a bomb about to explode. Damien began to burn with a jealousy he had never experienced before. His nights with Isabel became tense encounters of pain and pleasure, where both constantly tested their own emotional and physical limits. He touched her with a guilt he couldn't comprehend, a desperate urgency to mark a territory that was legally his. She responded with a confusing mix of genuine fear and growing desire that both scared and excited her. It was as toxic as pure poison, and it was as real as life itself. She loved him. She discovered with horror, without fully understanding what love was. He wanted her with an intensity that drove him insane, even though he was incapable of showing tenderness. But neither of them knew how to love without destroying, how to possess without annihilating, how to touch without hurting. During the day, when Damien was in endless meetings about expanding the business to Europe, Isabel would casually meet Raphael in the resort gardens. He was always working, photographing interesting angles of the modern architecture, capturing the golden Miami light reflected in the glass of the buildings, documenting the discreet elegance of the spaces that would soon grace international luxury magazines. "You have sad eyes," he said one afternoon, while adjusting the lens of his professional camera. They were sitting on a double lounge chair by the infinity pool, she in a white cotton dress that danced in the wind, he in a light blue linen shirt and crumpled khaki pants. "Sad." Isabel repeated the word as if it were foreign. She had never thought of herself as sad. Empty, perhaps. Lost, certainly. But sad seemed too complex an emotion for her limited experience. "Sad like someone who is watching life from a distance, through a closed window," Raphael explained, lowering his camera and observing her with those blue eyes that seemed to see more than they should. "As if you were a ghost of yourself." She felt something stir in her chest. "And how do you know what I was like before I was a ghost?" Raphael smiled, a small melancholic smile. "Because I recognize the hunger in your eyes. It's the same hunger I had before I learned that life can be lived, not just survived." They began to talk every afternoon. First about art, about the books she read compulsively in the library, about the places he had photographed around the world. Paris, where he grew up with his American mother who worked as a translator. New York, where he studied photography and design. Tokyo, where he spent 2 years documenting urban life. Places that to Isabel were just distant names, but that Raphael described with such passion she could almost smell the markets, hear the sounds of the streets, touch the texture of the ancient walls. "Why did you agree to work here?" she asked one afternoon, when a tropical rain forced them to take shelter in the glass gazebo near the beach. Raphael was silent for a long moment, watching the thick raindrops run down the glass. "Because I needed to understand some things about my family, about who I really am." "And did you find out?" "I found out that family isn't just about blood. It's about choice, it's about care. It's about seeing the other person as human, not as property." He looked directly at her. "And I found out that you deserve so much more than what you're getting." Isabel felt her heart race. No one had ever told her she deserved anything. Her entire life had been built around what she owed, what she was obliged to accept, what was appropriate for a daughter of an important family to do or not do. "I don't know if I deserve it, if I murmured, her voice barely a whisper. "Everyone deserves to be truly loved, Isabel. Everyone deserves to have choices. Everyone deserves to be happy." Raphael reached out and lightly touched her hand. "Even you. Especially you," he thought, but didn't say it aloud. Damien noticed the change in her immediately. Isabel was different, more present when they talked, more defiant when he tried to control her, more alive when they made love, responding with an intensity that left him simultaneously ecstatic and terrified. She was slipping away from him somehow, and he couldn't understand how or why. He began to discreetly investigate Raphael Carter's life. What he discovered nearly destroyed him. The certificates, the documents, the dates, everything matched perfectly. Raphael was indeed his half-brother, the son of an affair his father had in Paris in the 90s. The young man's mother, Clara Carter, was an American who had moved to France when she was young, worked as a freelance translator, and raised her son alone, never asking the Knight family for a single cent. But there was more. Raphael had known exactly who he was all along, and he had accepted the job not by chance or financial need. There was a letter he had written to himself at 18, found by chance in a deeper search, where he talked about wanting to meet the brother he never had, understand the father he never knew, and maybe, just maybe, make some kind of impact on the family that had ignored him for decades. Isabel knew none of this. To her, Raphael was simply the first man who treated her like a complete human being, not like a beautiful, fragile object that needed to be protected or controlled. With him, she discovered she had her own opinions on art, politics, life. She discovered she was intelligent in a way that had never been encouraged. She discovered she could laugh out loud without worrying if it was appropriate. "Have you ever thought about leaving this place?" Raphael asked one afternoon as they walked along the private beach, their bare feet sinking into the damp sand. Leaving for where? Isabel's question sounded genuinely confused. For her, there was no where beyond this. Anywhere. Paris, New York, a small town in the Carolina countryside. Anywhere you can be yourself. "I don't know who myself is," she confessed, stopping and facing him. "I've never known. I was raised to be the perfect daughter, then the perfect wife. I don't know how to be just Isabel." Raphael stopped too and stood before her. The sea breeze tousled both their hair. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. "Then maybe it's time to find out." They almost kissed in that moment. The air between them was charged with tension, with possibilities, with danger. But Isabel pulled away at the last second, her heart beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I'm married," she said, more to herself than to him. "I know," Raphael replied softly. "But being married shouldn't mean being dead." That night Damien came home earlier than usual. He found Isabel in the library, reading one of the books Raphael had recommended, a novel about a woman who leaves everything behind to start a new life in another country. He watched his wife for a few minutes without being noticed. She was different. There was a light in her eyes that wasn't there before. A glow that left him simultaneously enchanted and terrified. "What's the book about?" he asked, approaching her. Isabel looked up from the pages. "About freedom," she answered. Without thinking, then realized what she had said and immediately regretted it. Damien sat in the armchair next to her, his body as tense as a violin string about to snap. "Freedom is a dangerous illusion, Isabel, especially for people like us." "People like us?" "People with responsibilities, with reputations to maintain, with families to protect. He took the book from her hands and closed it firmly. People who understand that some sacrifices are necessary for the greater good. And what if I don't want to make sacrifices anymore? The words escaped Isabel's lips before she could stop them. The silence that followed was deafening. Damien stared at her as if she were a stranger who had invaded his home. You can't be serious. What if I am? Damien stood up abruptly, pacing the library like a caged animal. You don't know what you're saying. You don't know the world out there. You don't know how cruel it can be to women like you. How can you be so sure of what I know or don't know? Because I know you better than you know yourself. Damien's voice was louder than he intended. I know you're fragile, naive, unprepared for reality. I protect you because you need to be protected. Isabel stood up too, the book falling to the floor with a dry thud. Or do you protect me because you're afraid of losing control over me? The question hit Damien like a punch to the gut. For a moment, he was utterly speechless. Then his expression hardened in a way she had never seen before. Go to our room, he said in a dangerously low voice. Now. Damien. Now, Isabel. She obeyed, but for the first time, not out of fear. She obeyed because she chose to, because she wanted to think, because she needed time to process what was happening to her. And that subtle difference, that small shift in motivation, was like a crack in a dam that would soon become a flood. Damien remained alone in the library for hours. He drank scotch straight from the bottle, something he never did. He replayed every interaction he had observed between Isabel and Raphael, every smile, every glance. Every moment she seemed more alive than he had ever seen her, and then he made a decision that would change everything. The next morning he called Raphael for a private conversation in his office. The young man arrived punctually with his usual natural ease, suspecting nothing. Sit down, Damien said curtly, not looking up from the papers on his desk. Raphael sat, observing the brother who didn't know he was his brother. There was a tension in the air he couldn't quite identify. Your mother's name is Clara Carter, Damien said suddenly, dropping a folder on the desk. Born in Charleston, moved to Paris in 1994, works as a freelance translator. You were born in 1995. Your father is sitting right in front of you. Raphael froze. He had prepared for this conversation for years, but now that it was happening, he felt completely unprepared. You knew who I was from the beginning, Damien continued, his voice as cold as ice. You accepted this job for a reason. You came here with a very specific purpose. I came here to meet you, Raphael finally managed to say, to understand what kind of man my father was, to see if there was anything in you worth knowing. And what did you conclude? Raphael looked directly into Damien's eyes. I concluded that you are exactly the kind of man I expected you to be. Cold, controlling, incapable of loving anything beyond your own power. And yet you decided to try and steal my wife. I'm not trying to steal anyone. I'm trying to help a woman discover that she has choices. Damien rose slowly, leaning his hands on the desk. Isabel doesn't have choices. She has obligations, just as you now have a very simple choice to make. What choice? You can leave tomorrow and never come back, or you can stay and find out what kind of war I'm capable of waging to protect what's mine. Raphael stood up as well, facing the brother he had just met and already had to confront. She's not your property, Damien. She's a human being. She's my wife. That's all I need to know. And what if she chooses to leave? What if she decides she wants a different life? Damien smiled, but it was a smile devoid of any warmth. Then she will discover that some cages are impossible to open, no matter how much goodwill there is in the world. The threat hung in the air between them, like a storm cloud about to burst. Raphael understood perfectly that he wasn't just fighting against jealousy or possessiveness. He was fighting against a man who saw the entire world as an extension of his own territory, including the people he claimed to love. Isabel felt the change immediately. Damien came home that night different, carrying a dark energy that made all the mansion staff walk on tiptoes. During dinner, he watched her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable, as if studying prey before the final strike. Raphael is leaving tomorrow, he said suddenly, breaking the silence that had settled between them. Isabel nearly dropped her wineglass. "Why?" "The job wasn't finished." "The job is finished enough." Damien cut a piece of steak with more force than necessary. "He got what he came here for." "I don't understand." Damien put down his cutlery and stared at her. "Raphael Carter isn't just a photographer, Isabel. He's my half-brother. My father's illegitimate son with an American woman who lived in Paris. He came here knowing exactly who I was, who you were, and what he could gain by getting close to you." Isabel's world stopped. Damien's words echoed in her head like distant bells. Raphael was Damien's brother. He had lied to her from the very first day. All that kindness, all that understanding, all that care. It was part of a game she didn't understand. "You're lying," she murmured, but her voice sounded weak, even to her own ears. "I have all the documents if you want to see them. Certificates, letters, photographs. He planned everything from the start." Damien stood up and walked over to her, placing his hands on her shoulders. "He used you to get to me, Isabel. He used your innocence against me." Tears began to stream down her face beyond her control. She didn't know if she was crying from anger, disappointment, pain, or the horrible feeling that she had been manipulated by every man in her life in different ways. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I wanted to protect you. Because I knew this would hurt you." Damien pulled her close, hugging her with a tenderness she didn't expect. "Because, despite everything, I love you in my own twisted, selfish way." It was the first time Damien had ever said he loved her, and he chose the worst possible moment to do it. Isabel lay awake all night staring out the bedroom window, watching the moon reflected in the infinity pool. Raphael had lied about who he was, but had he also lied about his feelings for her? Had he lied about seeing her as a human being? Had he lied about everything? The next morning, she went down for breakfast and found a letter on the veranda table. Her name was written in Raphael's beautiful, careful handwriting. "Isabel, by the time you read this, I will be gone. Damien told me he revealed who I really am, and I know you must be confused, hurt, perhaps even furious with me. You have every right to be. It's true that I am Damien's half-brother. It's true I came here knowing this. But it's not true that I approached you out of revenge or manipulation. I approached you because I saw an extraordinary woman trapped in a life she didn't choose. And I approached you because for the first time in my life I fell in love. Yes, Isabel. I fell in love with you from the first day I saw you on the beach, free and alive in a way that completely contrasted with the controlled environment you live in. I fell in love with your intelligence, which shines despite years of repression. I fell in love with your strength, which exists even when you believe you are fragile. I can't compete with Damien for your heart, because I know that, in some complicated way, you love him. But I can give you something he never can, the absolute certainty that you deserve to be happy. You deserve to choose your own life. You deserve to be loved for who you truly are, not for who they expect you to be. If you ever decide you want something different, I'll be in Paris. My address is on the back of this letter, not necessarily as a romantic option, but as a friend who sees you for what you truly are, a complete, strong woman capable of anything. Be happy, Isabel. Be free. Be yourself. With true love, Raphael. Isabel read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it in the back of a drawer where she kept her few personal belongings. She didn't know if she believed every word, but she knew she needed time to process everything. Damien found her in the library that same afternoon. She was sitting by the large window overlooking the garden, watching the gardeners work on the rose bushes he had ordered, planted especially for her. "How are you feeling?" he asked, approaching cautiously. "Confused," she answered honestly. "Betrayed. Manipulated. I don't know who to believe anymore." Damien sat next to her on the window seat. "You can believe me." Isabel looked at him with an expression he couldn't decipher. "Can I? Did you tell me about Raphael to protect me or to control me?" The question caught him off guard. "To protect you? Really? Or did you tell me because you were afraid of losing me to him?" Damien was silent for a long moment. Then he chose honesty. "Both. Yes, I was afraid. Afraid of losing you. afraid that he could offer you something I can't. And what would that be? Freedom, Damien admitted, the word coming out like a painful confession. He can offer you the freedom I don't know how to give. Isabel turned to face him completely. Why don't you know how? Because I never learned that love can exist without possession. Because I was raised to believe that protecting means controlling. Because, he hesitated, then continued, because I'm afraid that if I give you total freedom, you'll discover you can live without me. It was the most honest moment Damien had ever had with her, and paradoxically, it was when Isabel finally began to truly love him, not out of dependency or duty, but by recognizing in the cold, controlling man a wounded boy who never learned to love in a healthy way. Damien, she said softly, touching his face. True love isn't possession. It's a choice. Every day the person chooses to stay, chooses to love, chooses to build something together. When you trap me here, you're not guaranteeing my love. You're preventing me from choosing you freely. He took her hand and kissed it. I don't know how to do it any other way. Then learn with me. Let's learn together. That night, they made love in a completely different way, without desperate urgency, without the need to prove possession. Slowly, discovering each other, touching as if for the first time. Damien whispered words of love in her ear, and Isabel responded with a passion that came from the heart, not from duty. It was then, a few weeks later, in the midst of this phase of rediscovery and reconciliation between them, that Isabel discovered she was pregnant. She found out one morning when she woke up with severe nausea and a strange feeling in her body. She took the test alone, in her suite's bathroom, her hands trembling as she waited for the result. When the 2 lines appeared, she sat on the cold marble floor and cried, not from sadness, but from an emotion so complex and overwhelming she couldn't name it. She was carrying Damien's child, a baby conceived not just in sex, but in the love they had discovered for each other. A child who would grow up in that golden mansion, but whom she had the power to raise differently. She didn't tell him immediately. She spent days observing Damien with new eyes, imagining him as a father, trying to visualize what kind of man he would be for a child. Would he be too protective, as controlling with his child as he was with her, or could he learn to love without suffocating? Meanwhile, the changes Raphael had initiated in her continued to deepen. Isabel began to question more things. She began to express her opinions more firmly. She began to make small decisions on her own, which books to read, which clothes to wear, how to spend her afternoons. Damien watched these changes with a mixture of pride and terror. Pride, because he saw the extraordinary woman Isabel was becoming. Terror, because he felt that the stronger she became, the closer the moment came when she might choose a life without him. "You're different," he said one night, as they dined on the veranda overlooking the sea. "How so?" "More present. More alive." He took a sip of wine. "As if you're finally inhabiting your own body." Isabel smiled. "That's exactly how I feel." "And that scares me," Damien admitted. "Why?" "Because living women are unpredictable, and I've spent my entire life trying to control the unpredictable. Maybe it's time to learn that the unpredictable can be beautiful too." That night, lying next to a deeply sleeping Damien, Isabel placed a hand on her still flat stomach and made a decision. She would tell him about the pregnancy the next morning, and she would use the news as an opportunity to set new terms for their relationship. She wanted her child to grow up seeing his parents as partners, not as owner and property. She wanted the child to learn that love was freedom, choice, mutual respect. She wanted to raise a free human being in a family that was learning to free itself from its own demons. But first, she needed to have a very difficult conversation with the man she loved and who was slowly learning to love her back in the right way. The next morning, as they had breakfast on the veranda, with the Miami sun painting everything gold, Isabel took a deep breath and said the words that would change everything once more. "Damien, I'm pregnant." He dropped his cup onto the saucer with a loud clatter. For a moment he was completely still, processing the information. Then a slow, genuine smile spread across his face. perhaps the first truly happy smile she had ever seen on him. "Really?" he asked, getting up and walking over to her. "Really?" She took his hand and placed it on her belly. "You're going to be a father, Damien." He pulled her into a tight hug, kissing the top of her head. "We're going to be a family," he murmured. "We are," she confirmed, "but I want it to be. A family unlike anything we've ever known. I want our child to grow up free. I want him to learn that he can choose his own path." Damien pulled back slightly to look at her. "Whatever you want. Anything you want. Even if it means giving me total freedom. Even if it means running the risk of me choosing to leave." Damien hesitated for only a second. Then he nodded. "Even then, because I've realized I'd rather have you here by choice than trapped here by obligation." Isabel smiled and kissed him, feeling that finally they were building something real together. But the universe, as it always does when things seem to be heading toward happiness, had other plans for them. What should have been the happiest period of their lives began to disintegrate 3 weeks after the pregnancy announcement. The first sign that something was wrong came one morning when Isabel woke up to find 2 new security guards patrolling the mansion's gardens. "Why are there armed men in our garden?" she asked Damien during breakfast. "Precautions," he replied without looking up from the tablet where he was checking financial news. "Now that you're pregnant, I need to ensure you're completely safe." "Safe from what? We're on a private, protected property in the middle of Miami Beach." "The world is a dangerous place, Isabel, especially for the pregnant wife of someone like me." She felt a chill in her stomach that had nothing to do with morning sickness. "Someone like you?" Damien finally looked at her. "Someone with enemies. Someone with a lot to lose." "What enemies? What haven't you told me?" "Nothing you need to worry about. It's just prudence." But Isabel knew Damien well enough to know when he was lying, and there was something in his eyes she couldn't interpret, a shadow of fear that had nothing to do with romantic concern and everything to do with genuine terror. In the following days, the precautions multiplied. A security guard accompanied her whenever she left the mansion. Her doctor's appointments were escorted as if they were military operations. Her phone calls were discreetly monitored. Her computer activities were watched. "Damien, this is insane," she protested after discovering she could no longer access certain websites. "You're caging me again. I'm protecting you and our child." From what exactly? It was then that the truth came to light in a way neither of them expected. Isabel was in the garden reading a book about pregnancy under the shade of a palm tree when she heard loud voices coming from Damien's office. The window was open, and without meaning to eavesdrop, she caught fragments of a phone conversation that chilled her blood. "I don't care what it costs," Damien was saying in a harsh voice. "I want Richard Manning completely destroyed, political career over, reputation ruined, family publicly humiliated. He used my wife as a bargaining chip, now he's going to pay the price." Isabel dropped the book. Richard Manning was her father. "Yes, I have all the evidence of his corruption schemes. Documents, recordings, bank transfers, 20 years of organized crime. Publish everything." A pause. "No, I don't care if it affects other people. He should have thought of that before trying to double-cross me." She stood up slowly, her heart pounding in her temples. She walked to the office window and saw Damien with his back to her, speaking on the phone with tense gestures. "And his mother, too, Eleanor Manning. I want a full investigation into the medications she takes, the doctors who treat her, her psychiatric hospitalizations. If there's any irregularity, anything that can be used against them, I want to know." Another pause. "Because, my dear friend, when you mess with the Knight family, you mess with generations of power. And power without mercy is the only language people like him understand." Isabel leaned against the wall, feeling her legs might not support her much longer. Damien hadn't accepted the arranged marriage just to resolve past conflicts. He had accepted it as part of an elaborate and cruel revenge plan that included completely destroying her family. "Yes, I want it to start this week. And I want it to be public, humiliating, and irreversible." Damien laughed, a cold sound she had never heard before. Richard Manning thought he could use his daughter as a protective shield. He's about to find out she's the exact opposite. She's the weapon I'm going to use to destroy him. The nausea Isabel felt had nothing to do with her pregnancy. It was the nausea of someone who discovers they have been used in an even crueler way than they imagined. She wasn't just a trophy wife. She was a tool of revenge, an instrument of destruction. She returned to the garden. In trembling steps, picked up her book and walked to her room as if in a trance. She sat on the bed and tried to process what she had heard. Damien didn't love her. Perhaps he felt some kind of possessive affection for her, but what truly motivated him was hatred for her father. The pregnancy hadn't changed anything. It had only made the revenge sweeter for him, because now he could destroy the Manning family, knowing that Richard's grandchild would grow up as a knight, never truly knowing his origins. When Damien came to the room that night, he found Isabel sitting in the armchair by the window, still wearing the same clothes from the morning. "Are you all right? You didn't come down for dinner," he said, approaching with a concerned expression. "I heard your phone conversation today," she said bluntly. Damien stopped in his tracks. For a moment, his mask of control fell completely, and she saw what lay beneath: guilt, fear, and a cold rage that made her realize she had never truly known the man she had married. "Isabel, you're planning to completely destroy my family, my father, my mother, everyone. And you're using our marriage as the platform to do it." Damien sat on the bed, keeping a physical distance from her for the first time since they had reconciled. "Your father is a criminal, Isabel, a corrupt politician who stole millions, who ruined lives, who— And what are you? A saint?" She stood up, confronting him. "You've manipulated me from day one. You made me believe you were protecting me when you were actually using me as a piece in your game of revenge." "It started that way," Damien admitted, running his hands through his hair. "But it changed. Everything changed when I truly fell in love with you." "When? When exactly did you fall in love? Before or after you discovered you could control me? Before or after you realized I would be the perfect weapon against my father?" "Isabel, please, answer the question," she yelled for the first time in her life, and the sound of her own loud voice surprised her. Damien was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his honesty was more painful than any lie could have been. "I can't separate one from the other anymore. It started as revenge, but it became love, or maybe it was always both at the same time." He looked at her with desperation. "But I know I love you now. I know I would do anything to protect you. Except stop using our marriage to destroy my family. Your father deserves what he's going to get. And my mother, what does she deserve? She will die if this scandal breaks publicly, Damien, literally die. Her heart can't take any more pressure." Isabel touched the belly where her child was growing. "And what does our baby deserve? To grow up knowing his father used his mother to destroy her family? Our son will grow up far from all this filth. He'll grow up free from the lies and corruption that marked your childhood. Our son will grow up knowing he was conceived in a lie." Damien stood up and tried to approach her, but Isabel moved away. "Don't touch me," she said with a firmness that surprised him. "Not now. I need to think." "Think about what?" "About whether I want my child to grow up in a family built on revenge and manipulation." The conversation ended there, but its consequences rippled through the following days like aftershocks from an earthquake. Damien tried to approach her several times, to explain his motivations, to justify his actions. He spoke of her father's crimes, of the corruption that had harmed thousands of people, of justice and accountability. Isabel listened to it all in silence. She didn't deny that her father was corrupt. She had grown up knowing the family's wealth came from questionable sources, but she also knew there were ways to seek justice that didn't involve using an innocent daughter as a weapon. "If you truly loved me," she said in one of their last conversations on the subject, "you would have found a way to seek justice that didn't make me an unwilling accomplice. And if you truly loved me," Damien replied, "you would understand that some things are bigger than our personal feelings." That was when Isabel realized they had reached an insurmountable impasse. He could never love without possessing, without controlling, without using, and she could never live knowing her happiness was built on the destruction of others, even if those people had committed crimes. The following week, the newspapers began to publish the first stories about Congressman Richard Manning's corruption schemes. The evidence was irrefutable, the proof abundant. In a matter of days, his political career was destroyed, his reputation was in tatters, and his wife had been admitted to a psychiatric clinic after a complete nervous breakdown. Isabel watched it all on television, sitting on the living room sofa, a protective hand on her belly. Damien was by her side, silent, offering support she couldn't accept. "My mother almost died today," she said when the news report ended. "But she didn't. She's receiving proper medical care. In a psychiatric clinic, because she couldn't bear to watch the life she built crumble publicly. Your mother was living a lie. Isabel. Now she can truly recover." Isabel looked at him with an expression he had never seen before, not anger, not sadness, but something much worse, complete disappointment. "Do you really believe that? That destroying people is a way of saving them? I believe in accountability, I believe in consequences, and I believe in compassion, in forgiveness, in finding ways to heal without causing more pain." That night, Isabel made a decision that had been slowly forming since the conversation she overheard. She could no longer live in that golden mansion, knowing her presence there represented her family's suffering. She couldn't raise a child in an atmosphere of revenge and manipulation, and she couldn't continue loving a man who was incapable of choosing love over control when the two came into conflict. She spent the early morning hours writing a letter, a long, painful, honest letter, a letter that explained her reasons, her feelings, her hopes for the future, a letter that told Damien she loved him, but that she couldn't teach the child growing in her womb that love was synonymous with possession. The next morning, while Damien was in a business meeting in downtown Miami, Isabel packed a bag, discreetly. She took no jewelry, no expensive clothes, nothing that Damien could interpret as theft. She took only her personal belongings, a few books he had given her, and the letter from Raphael she still kept in her drawer. She left her own letter on the bed, next to the wedding ring she took off for the first time since the ceremony. Then she called a taxi and left the mansion for the last time. She didn't look back. The letter read, "Damien, by the time you read this, I will be gone. Don't come after me. Don't look for... Don't try to convince me to come back. This is my choice, made with complete mental clarity and genuine love for you and for our child. I love you. I love the man you can be when you're not trying to control the world around you. I love your passion, your intelligence, your ability to protect those you love. But I cannot love what you have done to our family. I cannot raise our child, knowing our happiness was built on the deliberate destruction of other people. I cannot look at him every day and know he exists because of a revenge you chose to execute, using my life as a tool. You say you love me, but true love would have found another way. True love would have chosen justice over vengeance. True love would have consulted me before making decisions that affect my family and my future. I am leaving not because I don't love you, but because I love you too much to accept being an accomplice to what you've become. I am leaving because I want our child to learn that there are ways to resolve conflicts without destroying people. I want him to grow up knowing that love is a daily choice of kindness, not possession disguised as protection. One day maybe you will understand. One day maybe you will learn that true power is not the ability to control others, but the courage to choose compassion when revenge would be easier. If that happens, if you truly change, find me, not as the man who needs to possess, but as the man who chooses to love freely. Until then, I will raise our child with all the love I have for you and for him. I will teach him that his father is a complex man capable of great things, who might one day learn to use his power to build instead of destroy. With eternal love and infinite sadness, Isabel P.S. Don't try to find me through my family. They don't know where I am, and they won't. This is my decision and my responsibility. Damien found the letter when he came home, and discovered it was possible to die of pain without stopping breathing. Damien stood in the middle of the room for 2 whole hours, holding the letter with hands that trembled imperceptibly. He reread every word dozens of times until he could process what had happened. Isabel was gone, taking with her the child he didn't even know if he would ever meet. His first reaction was pure rage. Rage at being abandoned, at being judged, at losing control of a situation he thought he had completely dominated. He yelled at the staff, broke valuable objects, and made furious calls to private investigators, demanding they find her. But after 3 days of fruitless searching, Isabel had simply vanished from the map, as if she had never existed. The rage turned into something much worse. Total emptiness. Damien stopped going to meetings. He stopped answering calls. He stopped managing the businesses that had been his life's obsession. He would sit for hours in the armchair where Isabel used to read, looking out the window at the sea, trying to understand how he had reached this point. "Mr. Knight," his assistant said one morning, finding him in the same spot where she had left him the night before, "the board is concerned. Important decisions have been postponed for weeks." "Let them make the decisions," Damien replied without taking his eyes off the window. "What good are they if they can't run the company? For a few weeks." "Sir, with all due respect, it hasn't been a few weeks. It's been 2 months since she left." Damien looked at her for the first time. 2 months. How was it possible that 2 months had passed without him noticing? "She must have had the baby by now," he murmured, more to himself than to his assistant. It was this thought that pulled him out of the stupor he had fallen into. Somewhere in the world, his child had been born, and he knew nothing about it. He didn't know if it was a boy or a girl, if it was born healthy, if Isabel had made it through the birth safely. He didn't know if the child had his eyes or hers, if it cried a lot, if it smiled. For the first time in his life, Damien understood what true regret meant. He began to reread Isabel's letter with different eyes. Instead of focusing on her accusations, he started to pay attention to the love that still shone through her words. She loved him. She had left because she loved him, not in spite of it. And this realization was like a punch to the gut. "Cancel everything related to Congressman Manning," he told his legal team in a tense meeting a week later. "All investigations, all scheduled publications, all lawsuits." "But sir, we've already invested millions in this, and the evidence—" "I don't care. Stop everything." "May I ask why?" Damien looked out his office window, watching the city stretch to the horizon. "Because my wife was right. There are better ways to seek justice." In the months that followed, Damien began a transformation that no one, not even himself, believed was possible. He started therapy for the first time in his life, something he had always scorned as a weakness. He discovered that his patterns of control and possession stemmed from a childhood where love was conditional on obedience, where affection was used as a reward for good behavior. He began to question every decision he had ever made. How many people had he hurt in the name of business? How many times had he chosen power over compassion? How many opportunities for genuine happiness had he squandered for fear of losing control? He sold off parts of his hotel empire, keeping only those with sentimental value. He stepped down as CEO of the company, handing control over to a professional board. He began to get involved with organizations that helped families who were victims of political corruption, an irony that did not escape him, but which seemed the most honest way to repair some of the damage. And every single day, without exception, he wrote letters to Isabel that he never sent. Letters where he talked about his reflections, his changes, his growth. Letters where he apologized in every way possible. Letters where he spoke of how much he missed her and the child he had never met. Meanwhile, on the other side of the country, in a small coastal city in South Carolina, Isabel was building a new life with the son, who had been born on a rainy autumn afternoon. Gabriel Manning, she had given him her own surname, not Damien's, was a boy with golden hair like hers and intense brown eyes like his father's. He had Isabel's easy smile and Damien's stubborn determination. Isabel had chosen Charleston because it was far enough from Miami not to be easily found, yet a large enough city for her to work and live in relative anonymity. She rented a small apartment near the beach, found a job in an independent bookstore that also served as a cafe, and raised Gabriel with all the love in her heart. They were difficult years. Money was tight, nights were sleepless, and the full responsibility of raising a child alone was immense. But they were also years of discovery. Isabel discovered she was stronger than she had ever imagined. She discovered she could work, pay bills, make important decisions. She discovered she could be a loving and firm mother at the same time. Gabriel grew up a happy and curious child. He loved the beach just as his mother had predicted. He spent entire afternoons playing in the sand, collecting shells, chasing the waves. When he asked about his father, Isabel always told him the truth, tailored to his age, that Daddy was a man who lived far away, who loved her very much, but that they couldn't live together right now. "Why can't you?" Gabriel asked one day, when he was about 3 years old. "Because sometimes people who love each other need to grow up separately before they can be together again," Isabel explained, not knowing if she even believed in that possibility herself. "And when will he be grown up enough?" "I don't know, my love. Maybe never, maybe one day. But what matters is that you are loved by both of us." Gabriel seemed satisfied with this explanation and would go back to playing as if nothing had happened. But Isabel knew that as he grew older, the questions would become more complex, and she wasn't sure she would have the right answers. There were nights when she wondered if she had done the right thing. There were moments when she missed the financial security that life with Damien provided. There were days when she wondered if Damien had changed, if he had learned the lessons she had tried to teach through her departure. But whenever she doubted herself, she would look at Gabriel playing freely on the beach or laughing out loud on a Sunday afternoon, and she knew she had made the right decision. Her son was growing up knowing that love was daily care, not disguised control. He was learning that people could choose to be good without needing power over others. In Charleston, Isabel also discovered she could have true friendships. At the bookstore where she worked, she met people who accepted her for who she was, not for what she represented. She discovered she could laugh freely, have opinions on politics, choose her own books, her own movies, her own life. She started dating a university professor named Andrew when Gabriel was 4. He was a kind, patient man who treated her son as his own. Andrew knew Isabel's story. She had told him a condensed version without going into all the sordid details, and he respected the fact that she was still processing her past. "You still love him," Andrew said one night after Isabel had become particularly melancholic after watching a movie about second chances. "I do," she admitted, because she had learned to be honest about her feelings. "But I love the man he could be, not necessarily the man he was." "And what if he has changed? What if he's truly become the man you love?" Isabel looked out the apartment window, watching the moon reflected on the sea. "Then maybe one day I'll have the courage to find out." But that day seemed too distant to be real. On the other side of the country, Damien had also learned to live alone in a different way. He had sold the mansion in Miami Beach. The memories of Isabel in every room were too painful. He bought a more modest apartment in South Beach, near the shore where he would walk every morning. His days had a new routine. He woke up early, exercised, managed the businesses he still owned, and dedicated his afternoons to volunteer work or therapy. At night, he wrote the letters to Isabel that were piling up in a desk drawer. He was learning to live with the uncertainty of not knowing if he would ever see her again. He was learning that true. Love sometimes means accepting that the person you love can choose a life without you. And he was learning, slowly, painfully, that happiness was not something that could be conquered or controlled. It was something that had to be built day by day, choice by choice. "You're different, sir," his driver commented one morning, after 2 years had passed since Isabel's departure. "How so?" "Calmer. Less intimidating," the man said with a shy smile. Damien laughed, a genuine sound that surprised them both. "I'm learning that being intimidating isn't the same as being respected." And which is more important, Damien thought, about the question as he watched the city move past the car window. Being someone who deserves to be loved freely. It was a lesson that was costing him dearly to learn, but it was finally starting to make sense. When Gabriel turned 5, Isabel allowed Andrew to organize a birthday party on the beach. Seeing her son surrounded by friends, laughing as he played in the sand, chasing a colorful kite that soared high in the blue sky, She felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years. Perhaps this was her new life. Perhaps Damien would always remain a beautiful and painful memory, but not a present reality. Perhaps it was time to fully accept that some love stories don't have a traditional happy ending. Sometimes the happy ending is the freedom to choose an authentic life. But fate, as always, had other plans. A week after Gabriel's birthday, Isabel received a call that would change everything again. It was from the clinic where her mother was staying in Washington, D.C. "Ms. Manning, this is Dr. Robert Silver. I need to speak with you about your mother." Isabel's heart pounded. "What happened?" "Your mother specifically asked to speak with you. She's not doing well, and she said she has something very important to tell you before it's too late." Isabel closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the family responsibility she had tried to leave behind. "I'll be there tomorrow." She didn't know it yet, but that call would lead her back toward the life she had abandoned. And more importantly, it would lead her back toward the man she still loved, even after 5 years and all the pain they had shared. The flight to Washington, D.C. was one of the longest of Isabel's life. Gabriel slept in her lap as she stared out at the clouds, trying to prepare herself to see the city where she had grown up, the family she had left behind, and possibly the man who still occupied her thoughts after all these years. Andrew had offered to accompany her, but she had politely declined. Some journeys had to be made alone. The psychiatric clinic where her mother was staying was in an upscale area of D.C., discreet and well-maintained. When they reached the room, Isabel barely recognized the thin, pale woman lying in the hospital bed. Eleanor Manning had aged a decade in 5 years. "My daughter," her mother said in a weak voice, trying to smile when she saw her enter. Then her eyes fixed on Gabriel, who was hiding behind Isabel's legs. "And this must be my grandson." Gabriel looked at his grandmother with childish curiosity, without fear, only with the naturalness of a child used to meeting new people. "Hi," he said in his clear voice. "Mommy said you were sick, but that you were going to get better." Eleanor began to cry, silent tears streaming down her face. "He's beautiful, Isabel. He has his father's eyes." They talked for an hour about trivial things, how Gabriel liked the beach, how Isabel was working, how life in Charleston was quiet. But when Gabriel went out to play in the clinic's garden with a nurse, Eleanor held her daughter's hand with urgency. "I need to tell you something about Damien," she said, her voice gaining a strength it hadn't had before. "Mom, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do, because you don't know everything that happened after you left." Eleanor propped herself up in bed. "Damien called everything off, Isabel. The entire investigation into your father, all the lawsuits, everything. And more than that, he spent a fortune to make sure I had the best possible medical treatment. He still pays for this clinic to this day." Isabel felt as if the floor had disappeared from under her feet. "What?" "He comes to visit me once a month, for almost 5 years. He always asks about you and Gabriel, but he never asks for information about where you are. He says that when you want him to know, you'll tell him yourself." Eleanor squeezed her daughter's hand. "He's changed, my dear. He's truly changed. How can you be so sure?" "Because a man who was only driven by revenge wouldn't spend years taking care of the sick mother-in-law of the woman who abandoned him. Because he didn't try to use our vulnerability to find you. Because—" she hesitated. "Because when he talks about you, he has the same look in his eyes that you had when you talked about him in those last weeks before you left." Isabel felt her heart race. What look? The look of someone who truly loves, who loves to the point of accepting that the beloved needs to be free to choose. That afternoon after Gabriel had fallen asleep in their hotel room, Isabel made a decision that had been maturing for 5 years. She picked up the phone and dialed a number she still knew by heart. Damien answered on the 3rd ring. "Hello?" Just his voice was enough to make her heart pound. "Damien, it's me, Isabel." The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long she thought he had hung up. Then she heard a deep breath. "Isabel." He said her name like a prayer. "Are you okay? Is Gabriel okay?" The fact that he knew her son's name surprised her. "We're fine. I'm in D.C. I came to see my mother. I know, I called the clinic to see how she was doing after your visit. You still take care of her. I do. There was no pride in his voice, just a simple statement of fact. It was the least I could do. Isabel closed her eyes, trying to find the courage for her next words. Would you like to meet? You and me, and Gabriel? Another long silence. Are you sure? I am. Where? Isabel thought quickly. The waterfront at the Hay Adams. Tomorrow at 4 in the afternoon, it's a public place, quiet. I'll be there. Before hanging up, Damien said one more thing. Isabel, thank you for giving me this chance. The next day, Isabel arrived at the waterfront 15 minutes early. Gabriel was playing in a sandbox, building castles with the same concentration he devoted to everything in life. She watched him, trying to imagine what it would be like to introduce him to his father. When she saw Damien approaching, her heart nearly stopped. He was different, thinner, calmer, dressed more simply, light jeans and a white linen shirt. His hair was a little longer, and there were new lines around his eyes. But what caught her attention the most was the way he walked, without the arrogant urgency of before, with more measured, more humble steps. He stopped a few feet away from her, clearly nervous. Hi, he said simply. Hi. They looked at each other for a moment, 5 years of longing and transformation hanging in the air between them. Gabriel, Isabel called softly. Come here. There's someone I want you to meet. The boy dropped his toys in the sand and ran to her, then looked at Damien, with the natural curiosity of a child. Gabriel, Isabel said, kneeling beside her son, this is your daddy. Gabriel studied Damien for a long moment. Then, with the brutal honesty of children, he said, You're really tall. Mommy said you were tall, but I thought you were as tall as the fridge. Damien laughed, a genuine and surprised sound. I'm a little shorter than a fridge, but not by much. Do you live far away? I do, in Miami. Is it near the beach? It is. Gabriel nodded, as if approving of the answer. I like the beach. Mommy taught me how to swim. Is she a good teacher? The best. She's the best at everything. Gabriel looked at Isabel with adoration. Except making pancakes. Her pancakes are kind of lopsided. Is that so? Damien looked at Isabel with a small smile. Your mother was always terrible in the kitchen. Have you known each other for a long time? We have, Isabel answered. Since before you were born. Gabriel seemed to process this for a moment. Then he asked the question Isabel had been dreading. Why don't you live together? Damien knelt in the sand to be at his son's level. Because your daddy made some very big mistakes, and your mummy was very brave to leave to protect you. What kind of mistakes? I thought that loving someone meant never letting them go. But your mum taught me that really loving someone sometimes means letting them be free to choose. Gabriel considered this with the seriousness of a child trying to understand adult concepts. And did you learn? Damien looked at Isabel, then back at Gabriel. I'm learning. Every day. Okay, Gabriel said, as if the explanation made perfect sense to him. Do you want to help me build a castle? I'll make the towers, you make the walls. I'd love to, Damien replied. Isabel watched them play in the sand for an hour. Damien was patient, attentive, letting Gabriel lead the castle construction. He asked questions about the boy's life, listened with genuine attention to his stories about school, friends, and life in Charleston. He didn't try to compensate for 5 years of absence with exaggerations or grand promises. He was simply present, completely present, for his son. When Gabriel got distracted chasing a bird that had landed nearby, Isabel and Damien finally had a moment to talk alone. He's incredible, Damien said, watching Gabriel try to approach the bird without scaring it. You've done an amazing job raising him. It wasn't just me. He's naturally a special kid. He takes after his mother. They were silent for a few moments, watching Gabriel play. My mother told me about everything you did for her, Isabel finally said. Why did you never try to use that to find me? Because that wasn't the point, Damien answered. I wasn't taking care of her to impress you. I was taking care of her because it was the right thing to do. And what about my father? What happened with the investigation? I stopped everything after you left. I realized you were right. There were better ways to seek justice, ways that didn't involve using our family as a weapon. Isabel looked at him directly. You really have changed. I'm trying to be the man you saw in me when you looked at me with love, Damien said simply. The man who deserves to be chosen freely, not feared or obeyed. Gabriel came running back, plopping down in the sand between them. The bird flew away, but that's okay. He probably has a family waiting for him. Is that right? Isabel said, pulling her son close. Yeah, everyone has a family. It's just that sometimes families are apart for a while until they learn how to be together the right way. Isabel and Damien looked at each other over the boy's head, both surprised by the inadvertent wisdom of his words. Gabriel, Isabel said carefully, how would you feel if Daddy came to visit us in Charleston sometimes? The boy's eyes lit up. Really? You'd like our house, Daddy? And the beach? And the bookstore where Mommy works? And Andrew, he's cool too. Andrew? Damien asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. He's Mommy's boyfriend, but he said that if you wanted to come back to the family, he would understand, because a real family is more important than a boyfriend. Isabel felt her face flush. Gabriel, it's true. He said that when he was making pancakes on Sunday. Damien looked at Isabel with an expression she couldn't interpret. He sounds like a good man. He is, she confirmed. Very good. Patient, kind to Gabriel, understanding. And are you happy with him? Isabel took a moment to answer. I'm grateful for him. He helped me learn that I could trust men again, that I could be loved without being possessed. But are you happy? I'm at peace. Damien nodded, understanding the difference. Peace was not the same as full happiness. Isabel, he said, when Gabriel was again distracted by a butterfly, can I ask you something? You can. If I prove to you, not with words, but with actions, that I've really changed, that I've learned to love without possessing, that I've become the man you always knew I could be, would there be a chance, a small chance for us to start over? Isabel felt, tears well up in her eyes. Damien, you don't have to answer now. I won't pressure you, I won't pursue you, I won't try to control your decision. Just think about the possibility. Because I still love you, Isabel. I love you in a way I didn't know existed 5 years ago, and I love our son more than I thought it was possible to love someone I've just met. Before she could respond, Gabriel came running back with the butterfly perched delicately on his finger. Look, it didn't fly away. I think it likes me. It's a blue butterfly, Damien observed. They're rare here in D.C. It's special, Gabriel said with conviction, like our family. The butterfly took flight at that moment, dancing in the air before disappearing among the trees. Where did it go? Gabriel asked. It went home, Isabel said, looking at Damien, to where it always belonged. That night in the hotel, Isabel called Andrew. The conversation was difficult, but he was as understanding as he had always been. I always knew this day might come, he said with genuine sadness but no bitterness. Gabriel is his son, and you never stopped loving him even when you tried. Andrew, I don't apologize for choosing your family, Isabel. It's one of the things I've always admired about you, your loyalty, your capacity to love deeply. You're an extraordinary man. You deserve someone who loves you completely, without reservations. And I'll find that person, but first I'm going to miss you both. When she hung up the phone, Isabel called Damien. I'm not coming back to Miami right away, she said without preamble. I want you to prove what you said about having changed. I want time to get to know the man you've become. How much time? As long as it takes, months maybe. Are you willing to come to Charleston? Get an apartment near ours? Get to know Gabriel slowly without pressure. I'd be willing to go to the moon if it meant a chance to get my family back. It's not about getting back, Damien. It's about building something new, something healthy, something based on free choice, not on need or control. I understand, and I accept. 3 months later, on a sunny afternoon on a Charleston beach, Isabel watched Damien teaching Gabriel how to fly a kite. The boy laughed loudly as the kite soared. and Damien smiled with a genuine happiness she had never seen before. During those 3 months, Damien had proven his transformation in small and large ways. He never tried to pressure Isabel into decisions. He completely respected her schedule and boundaries. He treated Gabriel with infinite patience, letting the relationship between father and son grow naturally. He had found work in Charleston, selling his apartment in Miami to prove he wasn't just visiting. He was moving. "Mommy!" Gabriel shouted from the beach. "Come help! Daddy's kite flew higher than mine!" "That's because he's had more practice," Damien shouted back, winking at Isabel. She walked toward them on the sand, feeling lighter than she had in years. When she got close, Damien gently pulled her near, wrapping an arm around her waist. "May I?" he asked, as he always did before any show of affection. "You may," she replied, leaning against him. Gabriel looked at them and smiled. "Now it looks like a real family." "We were always a family, my love," Isabel said. "We just needed to learn how to be together the right way." "And did we learn?" Gabriel asked. Damien looked at Isabel, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "We're learning," Damien answered. "Every day we're learning." That night, after Gabriel had fallen asleep, Isabel and Damien walked along the beach under the moonlight. "There's something I need to ask you," she said, stopping and turning to face him. "Anything. If I say I'm ready for us to try again, really try as a couple, as a family, do you promise you'll never again forget that true love is about freedom, not possession?" Damien took her hands. "I promise. And I promise that if I ever forget, you can remind me. You can leave again if you have to. You can do whatever you need to protect your freedom and Gabriel's." "That won't be necessary," she said, moving closer to him, "because now I know I'm strong enough to stay and fight for what we want, instead of running from what we fear." "And what do we want?" "We want to be a family, a real family, built on free love, mutual respect, and the certainty that each of us chooses to be here every single day." Damien kissed her then, for the first time in over 5 years. It was a gentle kiss full of promises of new beginnings, of a love that had matured through pain and separation. When they parted, Isabel smiled. "Welcome back to the family, Damien. Thank you for letting me come home." And there, on the moonlit beach, with the sound of the waves in the background and the certainty that they had finally learned to love the right way, they knew that some love stories are strong enough to survive any storm, especially when the people involved are brave enough to change for love. Gabriel was right. Now they really looked like a real family. Because finally, that's exactly what they were.